The desperation now that people still supportive of Benjamin Netanyahu have to pretend that the conversation should be about something or anything else has reached, I think, breaking point. Nick had a call this morning which really focused my mind. It was a call from South Africa, and it was a point you don't hear very often anymore. It was a point that you heard all the time when the terror attack of October the 7th was still fresh in our memories. And it was the plaintive request to talk more about the hostages that are still being held by Hamas. I presume most people didn't notice when Benjamin Netanyahu said that even if a hostage release deal was reached, his intention to launch a ground offensive in Rafah would continue anyway. So, once again, it's Netanyahu that lets down people who profess their support for what he's doing, because he's made it crystal clear that even if the hostages were released, it wouldn't end the carnage in Gaza. And similarly, of course, it is the families of the hostages that are being held who have become Netanyahu's most vociferous critics in Israel. But if you are either not paying proper attention or you're incapable of shifting your position, then it's all you've got left. You have to repeatedly insist that people are somehow ignoring the hostages or ignoring the atrocity of October the 7th. I could mention it every single minute of this show for the rest of the year, and I'd still get texts saying, why don't you ever mention it? Right? In fact, I'll find you one now. You probably think I'm exaggerating. And now I won't be able to find one, will I? Oh, no, here you go. Thank you, Oliver. James O'Brien continually only mentions Israeli injustices in its warfare tactics, but never mentions Hamas and the hostages, listening to the earlier call from a South African woman who states if hostages are released, then the IDF will cease its operations. And then, just for good measure, because you possibly think I exaggerate, I have listened to James O'Brien for over 6 years. He is most certainly anti-Semitic. Say that to my face, Oliver, and I'll sue you from here to kingdom come. It is 9 minutes after 10, and it is a helpful illustration from Oliver of what I'm talking about. The desperation now that people still supportive of Benjamin Netanyahu have to pretend that the conversation should be about something or anything else has reached, I think, breaking point. That is why the world is now united in calling for a ceasefire. It's why even Joe Biden has finally discovered some sort of backbone and told Israel in terms to stop killing civilians. Even an implication that arms sales may be halted unless there is an immediate ceasefire. I hope these words are simple enough for people to understand. And I also think it's pretty plausible to say that Benjamin Netanyahu will not stop. The release of the hostages is obviously not his priority, because he has made it clear that that would not signal a cessation of warfare in Gaza. So I'm terribly sorry to Oliver and to the lady in South Africa and to everybody else still clinging to the carcass of that idea. It's dead. It's gone. It's as dead as 33,000 Palestinians, the majority of whom, of course, are women and children. So that's gone. So then you're left with the other so-called goal, which was the eradication of Hamas. Now, to cling to that idea, you have to completely ignore the fact that Netanyahu favoured Hamas over the Palestinian Authority, was gentle in his approach to Hamas, to Qatar and its protection and support of Hamas leaders, precisely because Hamas are opposed to a two-state solution in much the same way that Benjamin Netanyahu is. So in order to rob the Palestinian Authority of support and validity, he has sat by and allowed Hamas to become a much greater force in the region. He was also, of course, in charge of protecting Israel on October the 7th. I'll say that again because many people seem to have forgotten. He was in charge of protecting the people of Israel on October the 7th. So I don't really think anybody can with a straight face claim that the continuing offensive in Gaza is likely to eradicate Hamas, not least because there are now thousands and thousands and thousands of orphans who blame Benjamin Netanyahu or Israel or both for the death of their parents. That, to me, doesn't seem to be a particularly reliable recipe for peace or for the removal of the motivation that lies behind Hamas's position at this point. So why is Netanyahu pursuing this course now that he has lost the support of everybody? And this is a question that anybody can answer. Even people who want him to continue pursuing this course can answer it, but you will, I'm afraid, have to work very hard to persuade me. Well, you can't persuade me that it's all about releasing the hostages, because he has told us that it isn't. Okay? He has told us that it isn't, and his most vociferous critics, many of his most vociferous critics in Israel itself, the people who stormed the very Knesset the other day, are families of the hostages. So the idea that he speaks for or acts for them, I'm afraid, is dead in the water. So you can't do that. If you want to somehow explain to everybody how creating thousands and thousands and thousands of orphans, displacing 1.7 million people, is going to make them somehow more amenable or make them feel more warmly towards the government that has ordered it, that has caused the displacement, that has ordered the killing, that has facilitated the carnage, then I'm all ears. 0345 6060973. So why is Benjamin Netanyahu committed to this course, even as his most powerful and influential allies have urged him to abandon it? That's the question. And of course, it's very, very important to remember that many people don't blame Israel. Many people blame Jews. And that causes problems way beyond the boundaries of Israel or Gaza or the West Bank or even the Middle East. That causes problems everywhere. That prompts anti-Semitic attacks in European countries. The idea that everybody born into the Jewish faith is either comfortable with or supportive of the continuing carnage in Gaza is profoundly and horribly wrong. But one of the most tragic side effects, I think, of labeling anybody who criticizes the Israeli government anti-Semitic is that the conflation, the other side of that coin, is that everybody Jewish is on the hook for what Israel does. They're both utterly ridiculous. I wonder if you've noticed that before. That they are the mirror images of each other. It is as disgusting to claim that anybody criticizing Israel is anti-Semitic as it is to claim that everybody Jewish must somehow be supportive of what the IDF is doing in Gaza. I think that the allegations of anti-Semitism levelled at Alan Duncan are kind of nibbling at the edges of that second prejudice, the idea that it is anti-Semitic to suggest that someone Jewish is more loyal to Israel than they are to the UK, even if this is where they live. But think about that. I don't know that penny's ever dropped quite as loudly for me before. So to call everybody criticising Israel anti-Semitic is the same as claiming that everybody Jewish must support what Israel is currently doing. They're both incredibly offensive conflations, but one, of course, is rightly treated with disgust, whereas the other is mainstreamed into the heart of the British media, never mind. Well, I say public discourse as opposed to public opinion, because public opinion was where Joe Biden has gone months ago. Public opinion was opposed to Israel's actions in Gaza months ago. Public opinion has been pretty clear now for, at least all of 2024. The calls for a ceasefire were not confined to almost all of the United Nations. They ran like Blackpool through a stick of rock through the populations of the member countries, even indeed the countries that were abstaining or voting against it in the cases of America and the UK, saw their leaders adopt positions that were at odds with the polling, with the opinion polling of the populations. So, why is Netanyahu still doing this? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. A couple of quick texts. I shall read the first ones that have come in, and you then, of course, are welcome to contribute, to contradict, or to make entirely separate points as you see fit. But I shall read these, and then I shall open the phone lines, and then we'll take a brief break. So this is from Martin, who says, I have to listen to your show on catch-up due to work. However, I hope that you can convey my message even if you aren't covering Gaza today. Your handling of the situation has been full of humanity, balance, and your logical quotes, just counting, end quotes. I read that just as a simple counter to what Oliver said. I hope what I have to say will remove the scales from the eyes of those who don't realise how the killing of innocent people will be a recruitment drive for Hamas or their successors. I grew up in nationalist West Belfast in the 60s, 70s and 80s during dark and violent times when ordinary people faced threats from the IRA, from loyalist paramilitaries and, yes, from the British Army. Events on Bloody Sunday in 1972, however, caused the biggest recruitment drive the Provos had ever seen. That's the Provisional IRA. Our troubled history continued for a further 26 years. Hatred and distrust between Catholic and Protestant nearly took us into the abyss on many occasions. Gaza and Israel are obviously there now. However, we stepped back. I despair at the events of the last 6 months and the deaths of 33,000 plus, or 34,000 plus, sorry, he's written. However, because that includes the 1,200 killed by Hamas on October the 7th, quite rightly. However, I hold a glimmer of hope. Through a process, we established a peace, albeit imperfect, and now we don't kill each other. If we could do it, surely the greatest of enemies can. And that's from Martin, who speaks from Belfast. And this from Chris, who is in Cumbria. He writes, my response to your question at 9:45, which is why is Netanyahu continuing on this course? He is now confident that nobody is actually going to stop his forces doing whatever he wants. We might bleat, and even the US might complain, but nobody will actually do anything. He may have accepted that his time in charge is limited and that he might even face prosecution in Israel for his behaviour last October. So his motivation, I think, is similar to other leaders coming close to the end of their time in office. He is building his legacy. He might not finish the cleansing of Gaza, but he will be seen as the leader who did most to create the greater Israel. And we will do nothing. I hope Chris is wrong, and I hope Martin is right. But I recognise and respect the freedom that both men have to hold and express both of those opinions. And you have that freedom too. You can ring today and tell me any answer you like within the realms of legality and libel law, any answer you like as to why you think Benjamin Netanyahu insists on pursuing the course of carnage in Gaza, even as his most reliable, doughty and historic allies plead with him to stop. That is the question. They are pleading with him to stop killing civilians. He is currently refusing. Why? Because under almost any objective analysis, the support of America in particular, and the West in general, but America in particular, has been perceived as intrinsic to anything and everything that Israel does that could be construed as controversial. And now America is saying, please stop. And Benjamin Netanyahu is currently saying no. Why?